Hey loves, it's Britt, and in this video I wanted to talk about Juno conjunct Uranus in Synastry. You guys have requested this one, and I've had this one a lot. I have it right now in my current relationship as well. So let's talk about this fun aspect. So, Juno in astrology represents commitment and relationships of all kinds, but especially ones that become long term, and especially like marriages, and also contracts. And it's like our expectation of committed relationships, but also how we behave in relationships that do become committed, and kind of like our essential type of relationship that is more on the serious side, right? And Uranus is the planet of sudden shocks and changes and revelations and genius, innovations, and also where we can be a little bit unreliable, or at least perceived that way by other people, especially when we have an aspect like this. But Uranus on its like purest level is wisdom and, unconventional, rebellious energy that we all have in some point of our natal chart. So when we have this conjunction in synastry, there is usually, if there is going to be a relationship formed, it is formed, and the commitment is formed in a very sudden or shocking or unusual way. There's something very different or unconventional about this relationship. And the Juno person can really become enthralled with the Uranus person and the way that they act that is sort of rebellious. But at the same time, the Juno person can also be a bit shocked or like trying to rein in the energy of the Uranus person, who they kind of see as a bit of a, crazy person at times. So there can definitely be some judgment or some like the Juno person is kind of like the wife who's like trying to ground the crazy husband who's like this, wanderer or traveler or eccentric kind of rebellious energy or frequency, and the Juno person is kind of trying to like lock them down or at least like bring some sense into them in some ways. And the Uranus person also, though, actually feels this kind of like containment from the Juno person. Like they do actually really see them as like a person that they want to commit to also, because there is this sense that like even though the Juno person can be kind of judging them at times or trying to like, make them more serious or committed in some ways, they really feel seen by the Juno person. They really feel like they can be themselves with the Juno person. And you want to look at the house and also the sign, but especially the house placement of like where the Uranus person has their Uranus, and the Juno person is like helping them in that area become more committed, or become more like down to earth or grounded, or like thinking about relationship issues as far as that area goes. So the Juno person can kind of have this like relationship coach energy to the Uranus person, kind of teaching them like how to be a human in that area, and it can be very, very helpful. Now, the impulsiveness and the way that this relationship begins can also be very reflective of the way that it also ends. So this is not always going to show a long-term relationship, although depending on other aspects, a friendship that is long-term can remain. But Uranus aspects do not show longevity, and even Uranus to Juno, which represents commitment, still sometimes the energy of this union is too unstable or rocky, or the Uranus person is just too out there for the Juno person, and the Juno person might see them as someone who they don't even understand how or why they committed to that person. Now, if you have other compatible things in the synastry, this is just going to show that there's a lot of excitement, and there's definitely something different about like the way that this couple got together, or like they have very different backgrounds or something. And it doesn't have to be a deal breaker, or it doesn't have to show instability. But with other Uranus contacts and, even if there is compatibility, sometimes relationships just run their course. And an aspect like this can definitely show that the way that we enter the relationship is very impulsive, that the way that we leave the relationship is also very impulsive or sudden. Or it's just like with Uranus, it's like once the lesson is learned, we're done, and the emotion, the contract, it just ends, it just cuts off, it just closes. And that's that. There's no hard feelings about it, because you both just feel like, okay, the contract is completed. And Juno does represent contracts of all kinds, right? And like legal contracts too. So you could see with this like a marriage, like getting married like within 3 months of knowing each other, and then the divorce is also just as sudden or something like that. There could also be just like an unconventional energy to the relationship, like where there's just something about it that you guys do. Maybe you guys do something unconventional together, like you own a spiritual business, or you're in an open relationship, or you were like there's an age gap, or there's a background gap, like where one of you came from a rich upbringing, one of you came from a poor upbringing, or one of you came from this side of town, and the other person came from this side of town, or this religion, or this background. Now, it's not always going to show that, but that could be an element of the unconventional energy that's running through this relationship. Now, the excitement and the feeling of exhilaration that you can get with this one is amazing, and it's very high, and you definitely can realize a lot about like where you're blocking yourself, where you're hindering yourself. Like it's a very awakening contact. Like the way that I see Uranus, it's kind of like electricity running through you to awaken you, right? So the Uranus person is getting an opportunity to kind of like ground that energy. Like I said, think about that energy and like become more of their true self, more of their individual self, more of their authentic self. And the Juno person is really going to see them for who they are. And then on the other side, the Uranus person is going to, yes, shock the Juno person a bit, maybe open up the areas where they're rigid, or where, they expect relationships to look a certain way, and only that way. The Uranus person may never fit that mold that the Juno person thought relationships were going to be. This could be one of the most exciting relationships of the Juno person's life, because the Uranus person completely breaks their relationship constructs into a million pieces. The relationship doesn't start the way that the way that the Juno person expects. It doesn't end the way that the Juno person expects. It doesn't behave in the way that the Juno person expects relationships to be. But that does not mean that it's not fulfilling, rewarding, or a soulmate bond. It just doesn't fit the mold of the Juno person's idea or identity in relationships. So like you can look at the sign that this conjunction is taking place in, and like the Juno person is expecting long-term relationships, committed relationships to look like this, and the Uranus person is like a wild card. Maybe sometimes it is like that because, Uranus is a strong energy in someone, but the way that that energy manifests for the Uranus person is in the most completely uncontainable, uncontrollable way. So the relationship is like a wild card to the Juno person. So it's definitely like one of the more exciting contacts to have in Synastry, and it does show like a commitment might happen. It might happen quickly, but you just never know exactly the way that this relationship is going to turn out or end up. Now, in other types of relationships, it's one that awakens you to, where you are holding too strongly onto like, this is how it has to be. Like it's still, relationships are still an issue. Relationships are still the topic of conversation, but the Uranus person has this kind of different way of going about it. And the Juno person is shocked, appalled, and transformed at times by the Uranus person's energy. And there's definitely a lot of quirkiness, a lot of joking around, a lot of like best buds energy more than any other Juno contacts. This is not a serious contact, and most of the time Juno contacts are much more serious than this. This is a light-hearted vibe for a relationship. So I'd love to know your experiences of this one. If you've had it in Synastry, what was it like for you? I'd love to know. How did it transform your life? I'd love to know. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your requests, and we will talk soon.